You listen to conversations from leaders making good things happen in the Kansas City area on Changemakers Kansas City on One Kansas City Radio, 100.1 FM in the urban core, where we aim to entertain, inform, educate, and inspire. This episode of Changemakers Kansas City is brought to you by the Mainstream Coalition and Cafe, Kansas City's first and only Vietnamese coffee shop located in historic Columbus Park near the River Market.
Hi, everybody. So this is Representative Sharice Davids from the Kansas 3rd Congressional District.
And my name is Emanuel Cleaver. I represent Missouri's 5th District. And so we share parts of the metropolitan area of Kansas City. We share a lot of other things too, but the geography has provided us with an opportunity to see each other quite a bit, and it makes me happy that we do have this opportunity and relationship. So,
me too. I mean, it's really wild to me that I'm friends with Emanuel Cleaver, because you're like, an icon. And I'm just like super excited that we're getting to have this one-on-one kind of conversation about service, about leadership. You folks are probably going to hear me like gush over your being just a great human, but also somebody who's like very well respected in the Congress. And then, all the mentorship and friendship that you've given me since I've gotten here.
Well, you don't need much mentorship, as I learned early on. I think you're pretty much already seasoned in terms of the skills you need to make it in Congress. But your life, as I've seen it from a distance, I mean, you obviously believe in service as well. I mean, you could probably be on Wall Street with your law background, and or up in the upper realms of corporate America, but you chose poverty.
Well, I mean, so that's something that I actually wanted to. I feel like it would be really cool for folks to hear kind of how you think about public service or service, because you have, of course, I feel like you have served community in a number of different ways. And so we could call that a lot of things, but I'm like curious how you think about service.
Well, I grew up in Texas. I was born 26 minutes from the center of downtown Dallas, and I been down there too much in the last few weeks with funerals of relatives. But in our little community, I grew up in a family with a lot of ministers, and all of them were broke. My grandpa probably had 39 cents every time I saw him, and no more. But he was happy, and he was also a farmer, and he grew things and tried to give them to people who were worse, had a worse condition. And so I think that impacted me. My parents, my mother, especially on the volunteerism and service. And so it's I've been given this gift, and that I appreciate. And so I see it as repayment, that service is what I pay to live in God's world.
Yeah.
I owe rent.
Wow. Yeah. That's kind of deep. I feel like you're always dropping, I like to say seeds of knowledge and wisdom to people.
Well, I'm listening, and maybe the radio audience wouldn't know, but we serve together. And when you're talking about wisdom, I joke about it, and you've heard me joke about it quite a bit, and that is you take the job seriously. You're serving your constituents, and so you are usually up on everything that comes to the floor on the House of Representatives. I mean, I might read a summary, and you would read the whole bill. So providing service is clear, and you want to do it, as effectively as you can, and you have. I've been able to watch you, and the good news is people like you.
Well,
members of Congress actually like you.
Well, members of Congress like you.
Well,
they love you.
Well, not like they like you, but
well, I do think that one of the like ways that I've approached this job, and you kind of mentioned it, which is like me being diligent. I'm also nerdy. Is that I showed up when I got to Congress. I mean, of course, absolutely looked to you for guidance and, even just basic stuff about committees and how do you know who to talk to and when. And so, when you think about as you call it, the rent you have, I imagine you think about that as being like helping your constituents, but also I feel like you've definitely paid it forward in terms of helping me understand how to navigate the U.S. House, especially as somebody who didn't do anything related to politics or like legislation or any of that sort of thing. I mean, I'd worked on some policy stuff, but I can tell you that it's been really, really cool to be able to, just not only be mentored by you, but also for us to be able to talk to people about stuff that's impacting both of our districts. You said this at the beginning, but we are, our districts are our neighbors, but truly, I think, when people say 1KC and people talk about our region, I do think that that's been a really big benefit for this entire metro area. In terms of what you've done in the private sector, probably, and then what you did at the White House, maybe those things helped you prepare for Congress. Maybe. So it's so interesting because yes, every single thing that I did before I ran for Congress absolutely has helped me, but not in ways that I would have thought about. If somebody was looking at my resume, they might. I don't think anybody's looking at my resume and saying this woman was absolutely gearing up for Congress, because until I went to law school, because it took me 8 years to get my bachelor's degree, 4 to get an associate's at Johnson County Community College, and then 4 more years, and I got my bachelor's at UMKC. That I was doing like. I worked for a small wine distributor, so I delivered wine and, fixed up the warehouse. And I was a banquet bartender. I was a barista. I did a lot of like service, customer service oriented and service industry oriented jobs. And then I went to law school, and then I worked at a large law firm. And I did mergers and acquisitions and financings and, was in an office all day. And both of those types of experiences have had a huge impact on the way that I do my job now. Because, the government isn't a business, but we do have services that we need to provide. So we have a strong constituent services approach. And some of that comes from my previous experience. And so it's kind of funny because there's multiple meanings to service.
Yes.
Right. So there's the intention and the policy differences that we're trying to make and improving people's lives and making sure that they're not having to deal with things that, like you've said before, that there were things that you had to navigate and deal with growing up poor that, we can we can hopefully have an impact on making it so other people aren't having to do that same type of struggle. And then there's the nuts and bolts service.
Yes.
People can come to our office and hopefully we can help with Social Security or disability or VA benefits or something.
Yeah, I can't tell you the feeling I had when I told the first person that we had approved legislation and had been signed by the president to reduce the cost of insulin because this particular person has diabetes and was struggling making those payments, buying the insulin, and he was always concerned about whether or not he would have the money to do this life-saving injection of insulin. So I think we've been helpful, but I don't know. How do you ever think wonder? Now, how did I see this body, the Congress, before I got here? I mean, what did I think was going to happen? Does it match? Does reality match what you perceived before you came to Congress?
I don't know if I had a really good sense of it. I had a sense of the federal government. So I was like, okay, I don't know exactly how the Congress works. But what I do know is that a freshman member doesn't show up with a piece of legislation and say, I've got a policy solution to people who are paying too much for their insulin. And then it gets introduced and passed and all that kind of stuff. I knew a freshman member doesn't show up and immediately, get something like that done. And so I think the only reality that I imagined was Congress is like, there's 435 of us. Well, right now 433, but there's 435 of us. And there are some people who've been there for 20 years. There are some people who just got there like me. And that, my approach of like, I need to learn how to do this job so that I can do it really effectively. So I didn't, but besides that, like, I guess there is one difference is when I thought that, I don't know what I thought in terms of how people actually behave, but I was just kind of blown away at how like friendly and welcoming all our colleagues are. And for some reason it was like a big, like pleasant surprise for me that people, were called and offered to, like tell me which grocery stores they shop at or, stuff like that. That's kind of like not part of your orientation process. What about you?
Well,
what about realities versus how you imagined it?
Well, I knew a number of people in Congress before I actually went there because of I had been mayor and so
I was mayor.
And so before that I was in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the Dr. King's organization, where I first met John Lewis, and I was in such awe. I walked up to him and I said, Mr. Lewis, how you doing? And he said, hi, young brother. And I tell people now that John and I have known each other for 45 years, maybe longer, and I don't think he knows my name. I think it's always young brother. That's all I've ever heard. My last conversation with him in the chamber was, young brother, we're going outside for there was some kind of press conference or something. But anyway, I think I was in awe of many of the people because I'd seen them on television. I'd read about them for years. And I think it's just like you. I got there and I thought, oh, okay, these are pretty nice people. But I got to tell you what happened. On my first day, I'm so carried away. I'm in Congress. And so I walk out on the middle of the floor to call my wife and say, hey, I'm on the middle of the floor. So I dialed a number and put the phone up to my ear. And before I could hear it ringing, it was gone. Somebody snatched it out of my hand. And I turned around and it was Charlie Rangel.
Oh, okay.
And the Charlie Rangel. And so I was turned around and he had his finger and he just wagged it at me just like this and gave it to me. And I was thinking, is there anything down here where I can hide?
Yeah.
Or somebody bring me a blanket, I could cover myself. But he turned out to be one of my great friends, and I went to New York and volunteered on his last campaign. But it is a learning experience, and in many ways, it becomes a family. I mean, people take care of each other, and people get sick, and somebody will call, and hey, what can I do? And some of us have many operations and surgeries, and people like you call me to say, how you doing? So, I know people probably don't see that part of it. They look at the debates and the fighting and that kind of stuff. But I was pleasantly surprised that there's always the opportunity to become a part of a family.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen that in the short time that I've been. I say short time. It's been 5 years. It feels like 15. But I say short time because I can tell the difference with folks who have been serving together for a long time, the depth of like friendships and relationships and that sort of thing. And, I even think about our colleague, Mary Peltola, whose husband passed away recently, and like the level of support that people, and that was like not Democrats, Republicans. Right. It was like people, and then for folks that didn't have her number on the Republican side of the aisle, there were people coming up and asking me if, checking on her and that sort of thing. So I do think that there's absolutely stuff that happens out there that's more human than people would ever.
A lot.
Yeah, yes. would really think about, and.
For years, since you were there, I would sit right by Elsie Hastings.
Yeah.
And, we don't have assigned seats over in the House of Lords. I mean, the Senate. They have assigned seats. We don't. We can sit anywhere. But I ended up sitting by Elsie Hastings, who's an amazing guy, and he died 4 years ago. And so
was that 4 years ago?
Yeah, 4 years. It's amazing.
Oh my goodness!
The
I didn't realize it had
passed so
been
quickly.
that long.
And so I have a friend, Donald Payne. I was sitting in the chair one day, and Donald Payne walks over to me and he said, you and Elsie were close, and he said, it is right that you would inherit this seat. And so I've been sitting there since Elsie passed. I think, and I was with him when he took his last breath down in Florida. And I think, people probably don't see that kind of thing, and I think if they did, there may be a little higher level of appreciation, but I think a lot of the craziness that crazy is there. And so,
I know. I don't want to get, I'm not trying to give the impression that it's not sometimes wild situation out in DC, but there is also not wild. Yeah,
there's some not wild and very good. But I mean, what piece of legislation do you think, if you had to tell people, I voted for and supported, this legislation because?
I feel like there's probably an answer that's like very comms, like strategic communications answer. I don't know what that answer is, but I can tell you for me, it's the infrastructure bill, which sounds funny maybe to some people, but I'm just a huge infrastructure nerd. And to me, some of when I look back on this time, for however long I'm in Congress, I think when I look back on like the whole of a career, I guess I just imagine that most of the things that I do are not, that are going to be successes, are not things that like a bunch of people are going to know about. It's going to be making sure that we've got infrastructure upgrades to wastewater and stormwater. I mean, we deal with flooding here. We deal with drought out in other parts of the state of Kansas. We've got so many things, like getting more broadband to people. Like, those are the kinds of things that in like 50 years from now, how good of a job we do right now is going to impact like the whole state or metro area. It'll impact how many opportunities people have and how easy or hard the basics of life are. So to me, like, when I think about what does a successful time in Congress look like, I imagine it's probably not, it's not going to be like the Sharice Davids bill, blah, 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 whatever it is. It's like all these like, but I think it's going to be like reauthorizing the surface transportation bill and that kind of stuff. But to me, the bipartisan infrastructure bill was, it was like actually like a generational investment in infrastructure in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. So like for me, that's probably the thing that I'm like, yeah, we got that. Yeah. But then there's probably some good, the Violence Against Women Act, we reauthorized that for the first time in a long time. And we got a bunch of like really interesting and good provisions in there for, particularly for Native communities that have, just like a particular set of interests that are not usually, hadn't been covered by the Violence Against Women Act before. So.
Well, you said something that made me think about it. In Native communities also could benefit, but was there any turbulence inside when you came as a Native to Congress, and people, I think I've even asked you,
it's about to get deep
on certain pieces of legislation, like hey, what's if this impacts Native Americans, what do you what do you think? What do you, how do you look at this? Is that pressure on you or discomfort? Speaking for, a whole nation of people.
Yeah. Well, when I first got elected, it was both me and Deb Haaland.
Yes.
Then she abandoned me. No, I'm kidding. I'm glad she's the Secretary of Interior, of course. But I will say that it definitely, I used to say that I don't know how I would have made it through my first 2 years if Deb wasn't there.
Yeah.
And then when she left, I was like, oh, now I have to figure out how to do this, just me. But luckily, I think that my knowledge of the relationship that tribes and Native communities have with the federal government, I'm not like the foremost expert or anything like that, but I will say that knowing that I don't know everything and having a sense of who to go to ask questions was really helpful. But definitely there's a level of pressure of being one of the first two people like me in the Congress, but it doesn't feel like negative pressure. It feels like an opportunity to kind of show, because there are a couple of different ways that people think about Native Americans in this country, and one is that they don't, one is that they have a limited understanding of the history in this country, and unfortunately, most people often are not thinking about Native people in a modern context. And I think that is actually one of the biggest, to me, things that I feel glad about is that people get a sense of, whether it's me or Deb Haaland or Peggy Flanagan, who's the lieutenant governor of Minnesota, or in Kansas, Christina Haswood, who's in our state legislature, that it is not purely historical to discuss Native Americans in our country. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Actually, I think just your presence, and the way people think about you, has put the issues of Native Americans front and center, where I mean, people in the past wouldn't even think about it, but now if something happens, there's going as who said, the world is going to make a pathway to your door and say, hey, I don't want to mess up this. So tell me, where you think things are and where maybe I ought to think about going.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I'm really glad that Mary Peltola has joined us from Alaska, because as the first Alaska Native person to be serving in Congress, my knowledge about tribal communities is, I would say, is pretty limited to the lower 48. And Alaska has tons of tribes, and they also, very recent, in the grand scheme of things, very recently came into the Union. And so they have a different set of circumstances, Alaska Natives, versus the lower 48 tribes. And then you've got, the relationship that Native Hawaiians have with the federal government. So it's just it's really, really interesting to be here at the beginning part of what feels like a lot of new and different voices,
but you're going to be
being
history.
at the table.
I mean, 25, 30, 40 years from now, people will talk about the things that you did while you were here, and probably give guidance. Just
and
the
I
fact
hope that we retired by then.
No,
because I know that's all I'm going to say.
Retirement is not. You and I. I've planned out your life. You just won't listen to me.
No, I know. You've. Yeah.
With all of the negativity that people see in Washington, I mean, do you have any hope? Has there been something that would say, okay, I was getting down a little bit about, what our role is, but just this experience of reading this or seeing this has given me hope that we can do better, that things can change in Washington, that we can alter maybe significantly the perception of two warring bodies, and that we're there trying to make things better for the American public and, in fact, the whole world.
Yeah. I don't know if there's some one particular thing I can point to, partly because I think part of the reason I can do this job is because my baseline is what I would consider to be realistically optimistic. Meaning, I'm not under the impression that we're going to, me developing a couple of friendships with some of my Republican colleagues, which I'm working on, or working together with some of my Republican colleagues on various pieces of legislation and all that. I'm not under the impression that that will be the thing that solves the, political, what appears to most people to be pretty dysfunctional, a dysfunctional politic. But I would say that every time I see people who make some sort of effort to find bipartisanship or to work on, also do their own internal work, it makes me feel like, okay, we're on the right track. And from my MMA, I can't believe it's the first time I'm mentioning mixed martial arts or martial arts at all. I can equate almost everything. I can make some sort of analogy to martial arts all the time. The most growth happens usually from your losses. The most growth happens from the most painful things.
Yes.
If it's losing a fight, or if it's, having to get up at 5 a.m. every single day, even though it feels, beep it out. Just kidding. I'm not going to cuss. But even though it feels really awful, that is the time when you're actually growing the most. Right now, we are in a very painful, hard, difficult set of circumstances. And my hope is that we take advantage of the opportunity for growth from all of this, because I really do think that it is when things are the hardest that you see the most growth.
That's theologically sound.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I will take that as a compliment.
It is out of the dark. It is during the darkness that you can spot light down the road, and and believe that eventually you will be able to defeat the darkness with light. The most hopeful thing I've ever seen in my life is my wife's Cocker Spaniel, probably the most worthless animal that I've ever been around in my life.
This is not where I thought you were.
He liked his, he loved my wife, but he was pitiful. And so, but every morning I would get up. He knew I was getting up first. And as soon as my feet hit the floor, he'd run to the refrigerator and he'd just sit there and just wag his tail, just sit there waiting.
Wait.
And so, because I would buy cheap hot dogs, and I would get up, go to the refrigerator, get one out, open the back door, throw it out on the sidewalk that leads to the back door, and he'd get it. But the thing that was so amazing was every morning he got up and just wagged his tail, just sitting there, a little abbreviated tail that they have. And one morning it just occurred to me, boy, that is hope. That little Cocker Spaniel has hope. And
Eternal hope.
that if I wake up tomorrow morning, I'm going to get a hot dog. And he believed it, and if I've come to the conclusion that he can have hope in me, I sure can have hope in others.
Mm-hmm. Humans will surprise you.
Yeah, they like hot dogs.
Yeah. Well, they also like hot dogs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not the cheapest.
The cheap ones.
Maybe not the cheapest ones, but yeah. Well, good.
Hey, this has been good.
I know. I'm glad we got a chance to visit for a little while. And I heard a couple new stories today that I hadn't heard before. So, I mean, the hot dog one for sure was a new one. Definitely a new one. But well, I hope you have a good rest of your day. And also, like we are I think we're out of time. So we're not going to be able to get into the whole dynasty building that we've been doing with our football team. But I am positive you are going to enjoy yourself this weekend. So,
yes.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll FaceTime you during the game.
Yeah. I got one bad text from the former chief of staff for Steny Hoyer, who's now the chief of staff for the new governor of Maryland. Mm-hmm. And she sent me a text last night, and she said, I can no longer support you and the Chiefs.
Wow.
Because she lives there in Maryland. And so I sent her a little teardrop back. Oh. I wanted to be mean and just say, well, we don't need you. We're going to win anyway. Mm-hmm. But it didn't.
But no, you're that feels theologically sound.
Yes.
All right. Well, I will. I'll look forward to seeing you on the floor
next week.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Changemakers Kansas City on One Kansas City Radio, 100.1 FM in the urban core, where we aim to educate, inform, inspire, and entertain.